On April 28th, Democratic member of Congress Sri Thanadar filed 7 articles of impeachment against President Trump. The accusations range from abuse of power to bribery and corruption. Impeachment is the ultimate weapon that Congress can wield against a sitting president, as it promises removal from office and can be used to ban the convicted from ever holding that office again. But Trump has beaten impeachment twice before, and this attempt might already be circling the drain. It begs the question, what would it take to successfully impeach President Trump?
And today they did it again. Some guy that I'd never heard of. John James, is he a congressman, this guy? He said, ladies and gentlemen, I am going to start the impeachment of Donald Trump. What the hell did I do? Here we go again. They want to impeach me. This lunatic, he was up. Actually, I had the television way down, and I said to our great First Lady, listen, did I just hear I was being impeached again?
Welcome to the Politics of New America. On our show today, we explore how to impeach a president, the history of presidential impeachments, and the prospects of Trump facing a real impeachment threat during his second term. I'm Nathan Stone, and with me, as always, is show producer Josh Carmody.
Oh, I'm always here. Yeah, that's true.
Josh, have you ever been fired?
Yes. One time, and for good reason. I was kind of put in charge of a warehouse for an electrician's not manufacturer, but wholesaler. So electricians that were doing jobs locally, I was there in charge of that, and I was not doing a good job, so they sent me across the pond to the bigger show, and they were like, hey, no, it's a bigger place, it's a bigger job. And I bought that hook, line, and sinker, and it's like, oh no, it's because I was bad. They needed to see how I did stacked up against other people, and I was bad because I was getting drunk and doing drugs all the time. And I got fired with reasonable cause. Yeah, I was not good at the job. I also hated it. So, the lesson I took from that was you got to find the right job for you. I don't blame them. I don't blame myself. It's just what it is. Huh. But I have been fired that one time.
I have also been fired from a job, my very first job, and that was selling shoes at a department store. And not quite as dramatic, but I got a second job working at a library shelving books, and that job paid me $1 or $2 more and was infinitely more civilized than selling shoes. So I started being very picky with my hours, and so got into a little bit of a dispute with one of the managers over the hours that I could or could not work, and eventually got fed up and stopped going. And when you stop going to work, weirdly enough, they sometimes don't like that, so I got the nice little pink slip in the mail and was never regretted it for a moment. It was
so, you ghosted them.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it wasn't until you got a pink slip in the mail that you knew you were fired.
Yeah.
So, what was that waiting period like 2 weeks?
Honestly, it was about a month. It was a long time.
Just a month of uncertainty. Well, certainty on your part, but there's still that notch in your brain that's oh, maybe they're gonna call me and be like, hey, look, she went to pieces when you weren't here, so we need you back.
Yeah. No, everything was fine without me. It was probably better, honestly. I was not a very good shoe salesman.
I feel the same way about where I left. Yeah, I was like, oh, all these guys who are lifer warehouse guys, yeah, they don't need me around. I can get the hell out of here.
Well, the great thing about firing us is that it's pretty easy and it's pretty straightforward. Unfortunately, far less so when you're trying to fire the President of the United States. And you could kind of see why that's an issue. And so, Josh, there's three basic ways to remove a sitting president. The first two are kind of your more straightforward, and that is through impeachment, what we'll be talking about today, and that's when Congress gets together and decides that the president is in some way in dereliction of his duties and is not representing the office, and they can remove him. The second way is through the 25th Amendment. And so that is if the president is no longer capable of the duties of the office, then, or has to resign, or dies naturally, then the vice president shall become the president. And the 25th Amendment can also be used for kind of temporary things. So if the president had to have surgery, for example, and would be, under anesthetic, obviously can't do his duties, so the vice president becomes acting president. That's kind of the 25th Amendment. So there's those two, and those are the legal methods. And then, of course, there's assassination, which has been a popular method in American history for removing sitting presidents.
Certainly was, like, before our time, I would say. There's definitely people that I've spoken with or heard on other podcasts that have talked about how just it felt natural that a president got shot. It's just JFK, Reagan. I mean, presidential hopeful Bobby Kennedy. Like it happened a bunch, especially in America. It's crazy to think that we're not so far removed from this time of their presidents being very targeted and it working to varying degrees of success.
Absolutely. And so to start us off today, I want to give you a little quiz.
I like quizzes.
Yeah. So I want you to, and you just have to throw me some numbers here. Mm-hmm. How many presidents have been successfully impeached and removed from office versus how many have been assassinated?
Ooh, I think impeached and removed from office. It's hard to say because I know Trump was impeached. Clinton was impeached. Neither were removed from office. Nixon was impeached, but I don't know if that's what removed him from office. I think he possibly resigned or something. So in terms of like an actual successful beginning to end impeachment, I'm going to say 2. And I feel like they're like pre-Nixon. Assassinations, all I can think of is JFK. Because, again, Reagan was shot, but he did survive. So, yeah, I can't think of another. Because the other one that everyone always likes to talk about is, I think it was Teddy got shot and continued his speech. It's like, yeah, the hell with you. So, I'm going to say 1 for assassinated, 2 for impeached.
Okay. All right. Well, starting off, 0 presidents have been successfully impeached. So we're starting with a real good, yeah.
Cool,
so
cool, good, great.
4 presidents, only 4 presidents in history, have had to go to trial for been impeached and had a trial.
Yeah.
All 4 of those have been acquitted. And 3 of those have been in our lifetimes. We have lived through most presidential impeachment proceedings. So the one that we didn't live through was Andrew Johnson in 1868. We'll get to him. He's an interesting one. There was Bill Clinton, of course, 1998. Donald Trump, 2019. And then Donald Trump, 2021. On the assassinated side, we have 4 sitting presidents have been killed. Lincoln, of course.
Yep. James
A. Garfield in 1881. William McKinley in 1901. And JFK in 1963.
God, I watched National Treasure 2 so recently. How did I forget about Lincoln? I feel really stupid forgetting about Lincoln. I'm like, yeah, no. JFK got shot. No other president got shot. No, nothing ever. Yeah. I feel so stupid about that. All right. Okay. Let's continue.
So if we're looking at efficacy of, ways to remove a president, impeachments unfortunately fall well below assassinations in terms of actually getting rid of presidents. And there's some reasons for that, and some pretty good ones. So what in the world is an impeachment? Because it sounds very formal, but what it basically is bringing charges against the president that they have in some way sullied the office of the president. He can be impeached for reasons of treason, bribery, and other high crimes and misdemeanors. So we're going to start off strong here. If you've listened to a few other episodes of the show, you'll know one of my pet peeves about American democracy is the way that the Constitution gives you things like this, other high crimes and misdemeanors, and in no way defines what that is. So each president that has been impeached to this point, when Congress goes to impeach them, uses this other high crimes and misdemeanors section to charge the president. Now, how does this all start? Well, in Trump's case, in 2025, it starts with the House. And it starts with a resolution by a congressman, Mr. Thanedar, on behalf of himself and several other Democrats. House Resolution 353, April 28th, 2025. And
It's probably not helped that his name sounds like a Marvel villain. Like,
I know.
Thanedar is coming for President Trump. I was like, oh boy, okay. Well, we're not winning any points with the Fox crowd. Okay.
So he and his fellow, I think it's 4 other fellow Democrats, have brought 7 articles of impeachment. Each of these articles is basically like a charge, right? So if the police catch you doing a bunch of stuff, they might charge you with, resisting arrest plus breaking and entering plus so and such and such. And that is basically what this is. Now, what's interesting about this is that Thanedar and his crew, Jesus. Okay, no, we can't say that.
Yeah. So Thanedar, Proxima Midnight, Ebony Maw, they were all coming for Trump.
He's brought up the cases of the Trump administration removing people from the United States to El Salvador, despite the fact that this is fully against the Constitution in terms of they have not been given due process, and against the judiciary of the United States, which at multiple times at this point has ordered these deportations to stop. So that's kind of their main thrust with this resolution to impeach.
Yeah.
Now, bringing a resolution like this doesn't guarantee anything. It's just like bringing a bill before the House, right?
Yeah.
You can push it out there, hope it flies, right? Most of the time, though, it's got no wings. It's going nowhere.
And if all of us remember our Schoolhouse Rock, there is quite a bit of work that goes into getting a bill through. So.
Mm-hmm. So right now, it's sitting in the House Committee on the Judiciary. And the committees on the judiciary are always the ones that are going to deal with impeachment. And a lot of the Congress people on these committees, especially for the judiciary, should usually have a legal background, so it makes sense. I'm going to play spoiler here. This particular resolution not going to go anywhere. But it's worth talking about because it's groundwork. It's performative on the Democrats' part. And far be it for me to criticize the Democrats for being performative when 95% of the things that we get out of the Trump administration on a daily basis are also performative. But
hey, we can criticize both sides.
Yeah. But
it even rhymes.
There is a distinct possibility, depending on how the midterm elections go in 2026, that we could see a much stronger organized push to impeach President Trump. Now, we've already had some Democrats come out and say that they are not going to be supporting this bill, which isn't necessarily a kiss of death, since the Democrats, they're the minority in the House anyway. So they would have needed all of them plus Republican support to pass this through. But it just shows you that some of the Democrats feel that the timing isn't right for this impeachment proceeding.
And even if they did have it, like, who do we have for Republican support?
Well, that's it.
Maybe Mitch McConnell. Like, there was a couple people who voted against some things early on.
And
it's negligible, honestly, like, in terms of the grand scheme of things.
And going back all the way to the very first impeachment back in 1868, even then, it was pretty much split party lines. It is very, very rare for any kind of bipartisanship as far as impeachments go.
Yeah.
No one wants to be the party that had their guy impeached. Not a good look, right? So... No. There's a reason why this has never been successful.
That's politics, baby.
Yeah. So, all right, Josh, I'm going to get you to reprise your role from, it might be our last episode, but your role as a congressperson from the great state of Delaware.
Yes. Tightening up my tie.
There we go.
Feeling it. Yes. Delaware. I'm in the Delaware mind state.
Excellent. So, unfortunately, your last play in the House, it was great. You got some Republicans on your side, but it didn't go anywhere. You weren't able to stop Trump's national emergencies and get them thrown out. So now you're on the warpath, and you want to bring impeachment proceedings against the president. Well, you're going to do that in the same way that you would introduce a bill, right? Except in this case, it's a resolution. You're going to say he has done these things, he has broken these laws. Very pointedly, what you're going to do is say in the resolution how the president is undermining or in some way lessening the office of the president, right?
Yeah.
And you're going to kind of list his crimes like that. So, again, you are a very persuasive guy. What do you need?
I am, yeah.
Yeah. What do you need to get this through the House? Well, it's actually pretty simple. You just need a basic majority. So, 50% plus one of the House will get you an impeachment. Now, that's when you can say a sitting president has been impeached. So, Bill Clinton, impeached. Donald Trump, impeached. Never convicted, never facing any kind of actual punishment, but just being able to say that they were impeached sometimes is a bit of a political win, right? That's what the Democrats did.
The big wag of the finger.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what the Democrats did in 2019 and 2021. Mm-hmm. And so what happens after you get that majority? Well, then you're gonna get some friends together. You and the House Democrats, you're going to appoint some members to basically be the prosecution for this case. And I'm sorry. Before we start getting people, there is the committee on the judiciary. They have jurisdiction over impeachments, But the committee chooses whether to pursue the articles of impeachment and kind of push it out to the full House and report those.
Yeah.
If those articles are adopted by that majority, then you will choose members to manage the ensuing trial. And that is your prosecution, your team. So how in the world do you try an impeachment? Well, you just kick it over to the Senate. So the funny division of powers is that the House is the only place that can bring charges of impeachment, but they can't try it. The Senate can try it, and they're the only ones that can try it, but they cannot introduce articles of impeachment. So it has to go through both houses, and it has to go through in that order. You have to bring it into the House, and then once it has passed through the House with a majority, it goes to the Senate. The Senate is where things get serious. So the Senate will set up a trial. The first thing the Senate has to do is agree on what the rules of the trial are going to be, because that is not spelled out anywhere in the Constitution. So each time there's an impeachment trial, the Senate has to make up what the rules will be governing that trial. And so that can include things about witnesses, just the whole logistical organization of this trial. Now, in the case of a president, presiding over the Senate will be the U.S. Supreme Court Chief Justice. So in this case, John Roberts. Also the guy on the Smithsonian board, if you're following along from our other episodes.
Which you should.
The
Smithsonian episode, I'm very proud of.
Yeah,
I
it's a very
think
good
more
one.
people should listen to it. It was a very fun way to start. Get out there, listen to our first episode.
Yeah. So the trial proceeds kind of like a court trial in a lot of ways, except it's not a criminal trial. And so that's important. So the Senate can't, if it finds the president guilty, sentence him to, 25 years hard labor. Not a thing that they can do. But what they can do is if the president is found guilty, he is immediately removed from office. The Senate then may decide whether or not to bar him from ever being able to hold office again. So all of this power between the Senate and the House, this was actually really, really important to those writing the Constitution. Impeachment is a power that they kind of borrowed from England. And kind of put it in there. And it's actually in Article 1, Section 2 of the Constitution. So you get, we the people of these United States, blah, 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 right? And then kind of next section, it says that the House of Representatives shall have sole power of impeachment. And in Section 3, right below that, the Senate should have sole power to try all impeachments. The framers of the Constitution thought this was very important, that this was a power that they have, because obviously the power of the executive, especially in the late 1700s, was usually absolute monarchy, right? Or something akin to that. So they really wanted to guard against executive power.
And if you're following along, when Nicolas Cage stole the Constitution in the movie National Treasure, these things were already written on it. These were not amendments later on. They were already there.
Yeah. Yeah. They thought of this. It's not one of the 27 things that they didn't think of that got added on. And I say 27. It's way more than that. It's just 27 amendments. And each of those amendments is usually crammed with stuff of, actually. So looking kind of at the history of it, Alexander Hamilton, which we all know from the musical, but also real guy, in case you didn't know, one of the founding fathers. His definition of impeachment is really good, actually, and it's just a method of national inquest into the conduct of public men, and those who have been accused of violating the public trust. When they built this system, this impeachment system, they made a huge mistake, though, one huge mistake, and that is the same mistake they made pretty much throughout American democracy. They didn't think of political parties. It just wasn't a thing that they thought was going to happen. Right?
Well, I think George Washington is, to date, I think the only president to win running as an independent.
Yeah, it immediately broke down.
Yeah.
Right? So, because in this world that they were envisioning, Congress people would just come together and they'd talk it out, and they might have informal blocks, right? And of course, if I'm a congressman from New York and you're a congressman from New York, our interests are probably going to align more times than not. And the same kind of thing with the Senate, right?
Yeah.
And the Senate especially was held. It was going to be this place of beyond repute, and so just to give you an idea of this, and the reason why this is important is because what they did essentially with impeachments is they set up a system for politicians to try other politicians, but never expected it to turn into party politics, right? So it honestly, when they were writing it, would have been much easier to impeach a president because you don't have half or more of the sitting members of the House that are all on this guy's team, right? Yeah. And same with the Senate. Now, I think there's a quote from Alexander Hamilton that best describes this thinking, and it's going to sound absolutely ludicrous when I read it here. So, the convention, they're speaking of the Constitutional Convention here, thought the Senate the most fit depository of this important trust. Where else than in the Senate could have been found a tribunal sufficiently dignified or sufficiently independent? What other body would likely to feel confidence enough in its own situation to preserve unawed and uninfluenced the necessary impartiality between an individual accused and the representatives of the people, his accusers? I would love to meet that Senate. Love to have met it. Don't think it ever existed in practice. So it's absolutely wild when you consider how this was designed to work versus how it has worked, which is everyone votes party lines, nothing changes.
Yeah, it's something that I have been impressed with some recent politics in Canada, which is where we are, full disclosure. I think we've talked about it before, but so people know, is the ability to make deals across party lines that they don't seem so foreign or weird to do so. I think there is a lot of things in Canadian politics in terms of policy that does already cross party lines. It's just how they're going to do it. Like if there's kind of a smaller variation as to what's going on. Now, obviously, we've just had a huge election. There was a lot of identity politics and things involved in that, but those lost out in it. The Conservatives were kind of torpedoed by Trump's involvement and by this, like, oh, well, we got to stop trans people from playing sports and using bathrooms. Like, if people were like, no, we don't want to deal with that. Like, we want to know what's happening next. What are you doing for the people? And even though for us, a liberal government has gotten in, they're very willing to employ Conservative Party members into positions of power, reach across the aisle to do things. And I like that we have that, but it's funny being so close to American politics for us, being the country right next to them, how insane that seems to all of them to even think of doing that.
Yeah, bipartisanship in American politics is something that I think is done more than it's advertised, but it's also on big issues like this, on something like impeachment, it would be almost unheard of, right? And it's something that I think comes from the two-party nature of the system, right? And in Canada, you have, and our last election is probably the closest we've come in many generations to an American style, to one of these two parties is, guaranteed to take the big lion's share of the votes.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there was times in the 90s, early 2000s when it was like 6 parties running, and it honestly was a toss-up of what amount of power each one was going to get.
Yeah.
And I mean, for me, as kind of more the layman here, Bernie Sanders being like, hey, Trump, you want to work on this credit card? He wanted to put a max amount of
I think it was maximum amount. Was it in terms of interest?
Yes.
Yeah.
So he wanted to put a maximum amount of interest to credit cards to kind of stop credit cards from ripping people off. And he was perfectly willing to work with Donald Trump on that. And I think that's good politics. You should be able to do that because they're working for the people. And when people aren't willing to reach across the aisle for something as simple as that helps the people, it really shows where the politics are at.
Mm-hmm. And it's an interesting equation, I think, for senators and Congress people to do that, because you do risk the more militant part of your party kind of coming after you for bipartisanship, as well as you risk kind of giving up some of that power that you hold by working together, strangely, because of just the fact that, you're helping the other guy, right? There's only one other guy, whereas in democracies that have more parties that are legitimate, so in a lot of European elections, if you have 5-10 parties, everything you're doing is in coalitions, right? So it's not even... It's not abnormal. It's not in any way strange to reach across the aisle and just see what deals you can make. I think American politics would be probably a lot healthier if there wasn't this this staunch kind of devotion to party, but at the same time, as the two parties drift further ideologically, those opportunities become less. I think you can argue the Democrats have certainly drifted rightwards over the years, but the Republicans have drifted so far beyond that to the right that the divide actually might be further than back in the 90s, back in the 80s, whatever.
Absolutely.
But yeah, it's really interesting stuff. So let's back on impeachment here. Let's talk very briefly about the impeachments that have happened, and then we'll see what might happen to Trump here in the future.
Producer Hannah here. Currently, the space is not in use. If you would like to hear your ad here at the beginning or at the end of the show, you can contact us at hauntedmouseproductions@gmail.com. Back to the show.
Let's start off with Andrew Johnson. He's the one probably most people don't have a sense about, mostly because if you're in your 30s like Josh and I are, you remember every other impeachment. So Andrew Johnson, he was the president right after Lincoln. Kind of came into it suddenly, you might say. And so what was the problem with this guy? Well, Josh, do you remember when we were talking about all those Confederate monuments and the Reconstruction? And you asked a very salient point, which was just why didn't they prosecute these guys more, right? What was going on?
What I had said was, why didn't they execute some people? And full disclosure, I cut that part of the episode because I looked it up, and the reason they didn't execute them was because it was a condition of their surrender, that people wouldn't be executed. And, a part of me thought about that where I was like, okay, but it didn't even execute like any of the generals or anything. But whether or not they were aware of it at the time, if you look at the history of civil wars, anytime they try to pull off executions, the war continues. It absolutely continues. So that stuff I get. So I'm sorry if this ruins your point. That just to clarify, that was something that I had thought before, but I thought on it, I cut it out, and then because it makes sense. But yeah.
And this doesn't ruin my point at all. But what happened afterwards, and you're not wrong in kind of thinking like, what happened to all these guys? What happened to all of these Confederates? Well, a lot of it happens to do with Andrew Johnson, and he was the man behind granting proclamations of general amnesty for most former Confederates, both government and military officers. And he also oversaw the creation of new governments in the rebellious states. And those governments were dominated by ex-Confederate officials. So he was brought up on charges because he really got a lot of his own party angry, especially. So he was a Republican. There were a lot of kind of radical Republicans in the era that wanted to be a little bit more punitive with the South, right? They didn't love this whole amnesty thing.
Yeah.
And Andrew Johnson actually got into a lot of kind of scraps about this, with replacing officials and kind of butting heads with Congress. And basically he dismissed a Secretary of War, replaced him with Grant. Grant was like, "Oh, I don't know that this is on the up and up," kind of like. And he was just,
I got to go to a West Point alumni thing. You guys deal with this.
Yeah, the Senate voted to kind of reinstate Stanton, who was the original guy that Johnson got, and it kind of turned into a big pissing match between Congress and the president. And eventually, Congress just had enough of the guy. It was like, we gotta. A bunch of members of Congress were like, we got to just get rid of him. And so that's kind of how the impeachment happened. So it was really interesting. It got through the House. So he was technically impeached, but then in the trial in the Senate, he was just by a hair acquitted. So you needed a simple majority does not fly in the Senate for convicting someone, and for impeaching someone. So in this case, Johnson, there was 35 guilty votes, 19 not guilty votes. They needed 36 to remove him from office. So he was very close to this date, the closest a president has come to being impeached. So he's an interesting one if you want to kind of read about post-Civil War America, but he of course isn't nearly as famous as the impeachment of Bill Clinton, and that all depends on what your definition of is. My favorite presidential quotes of all time, honestly.
What a smooth talking Southern man. Yeah.
So it's so it all started with the whole Paula Jones lawsuit in 1994, the sexual harassment lawsuit when he was governor in Arkansas. Then of course, as soon as Monica Lewinsky came into things, and then him lying under oath. But of course, that would depend on your definition of is. And so,
and just let's, for any of our young listeners out there. So Bill Clinton was caught up in this impeachment stuff because he was accused of having sexual relations with an intern in the office of the president. I feel like I thought I knew more about this than I did. Now that it's like the irons to my feet.
Yeah. So he was impeached. The charges they impeached him through obstruction of justice, and basically it was all about not so much the sex, the lying about the sex is what they thought they could nail him on.
Which is where the is thing comes
Which is where the is thing comes in. Yeah.
And this was what I thought I had a definition for, but I don't on hand. Do we have one?
Yeah. So this is when Clinton was testifying to a grand jury, and he's questioning the precise use of the word is. So he contends, so his statement, "There is nothing going on between us," had been truthful. Then this is him talking about his relationship with Monica Lewinsky. He said that had been truthful because they weren't in a relationship at the time he was questioned. So Clinton said, "It depends on what the meaning of is. If is means is and never has been," or he said that is one thing. If it means there is none, that was a completely true statement. So his quote here is a little all over the place, but basically he's saying is in the current tense versus is in all tense, right? Mm-hmm. So past, present versus his, are you in a relationship with her right now? Well, no, I'm testifying right now. How could I be in a relationship with her? There's some really good stuff in this. If you are a younger listener,
what an absolute dog.
Yeah. So Clinton, he got acquitted here. And this is, I want to illustrate this in Clinton's one here, because I've got the stats very, very close. But the way that Democrats and Republicans voted here is consistent with the way that they vote pretty much in any impeachment trial. So when the House votes to impeach a president, they vote on each article of impeachment. They kind of just go down the list. Yeah. So on his first article, Democrats voted 200 nay versus 5 yay. Republicans, 223 yay to 5 nay. It's pretty much similar statistics going all the way down. You have basically no chance to even get an impeachment to the Senate unless you are the majority party in the House.
Yeah.
It just doesn't happen. So let's then skip all the way ahead to the first impeachment of Donald Trump. This is in 2019. This is the first one. And it was the charges were abuse of power and obstruction of Congress. And now this one was interesting because it was it involved Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky, and Trump inviting him to the White House in order to try and influence Ukraine to announce an investigation into Joe Biden and Joe Biden's son, I believe. And also to promote a conspiracy theory that Ukraine, not Russia, was behind 2016 presidential election interference. So it was kind of a whole conspiracy here that they were trying to get him on. Again, this is a Democrat-controlled House, so they were able to pass that through. But then in the Senate, again, party lines come out, 48 guilty to 52 not guilty. And so in an 100-person Senate, you need a 2/3 majority. Mm-hmm. So 67 guilty votes is what you're looking for there. And they didn't get anywhere close. And they knew they weren't going to get close. Again, in this case, being able to say we passed it through the House, he was impeached, We have impeached this president. He's not going to suffer any consequences, but
It's on the record.
It's the black eye. It's the black mark.
Yeah,
exactly, on the
yeah.
record. Yeah. So that was the first one. The second one, I think, is the more interesting one because it was done 1 week before his term expired, just before he left office in 2021 on January 13th, 2021, a week before his term expired. And this is all about the fun that was had on January 6th.
Ooh.
Yeah. So this one is interesting because it was one article, incitement of insurrection was the charge. Because he was out of office by the time the Senate voted on this trial. What the Democrats were trying to do in this case is if they had gotten that through the Senate, they could have blocked him from ever running again for the presidency. Because he would have already been left. So you can't remove a president that's already gone.
Yeah.
But you could have blocked him from ever running again. They actually got kind of close on this one. They got 57 votes guilty, needed 67. So hard to get a 2/3 majority. Almost impossible. You would need true bipartisanship. The only time we have ever seen true bipartisanship in what is basically the removal of a president was Richard Nixon. So Nixon, with the Watergate scandal, he is actually approached afterwards, right? He's trying to hang on. He's approached by congressional leaders who say, look, Dick, we have the votes. If this goes to impeachment, it's going to pass in the House, it's going to pass in the Senate. You will be removed from office. And they basically give him the opportunity to just resign, which is what he did. So people think sometimes that Nixon was impeached. It actually never even went to a House resolution. Mm-hmm. Like it never really even started. But it was such a slam dunk. That he just kind of looked at it and was like, yeah, I guess I'll take the dignified exit, actually.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I guess you guys really did your homework here. Okay.
Yeah, they really did their homework on him. Yeah.
Richard Nixon, interesting figure.
There was a cavalierness about some of the old presidents that was just, they were almost a forwardness.
Politics in general. I'll look it up and I'll probably have to insert the title, but there was a documentary that came out around, I think, 91, that was comprised almost entirely of just hot mic political stuff. And the opening of it is George H.W. Bush sitting there about to have some sort of meeting or debate. And, the cameras are like all far away because they're just adjusting their cameras. But he's on hot mic, like talking to the other guy there. And he's like, wow, do you think Saddam Hussein's watching this right now? Like, it just and it's so candid and weird to hear them all talk about it. I'll look it up and I'll make sure everyone knows the name of it. It's a fascinating documentary to watch, especially in terms of like, we don't have that access to politics anymore.
No,
it's gone. Mm-hmm. Though maybe some would say there's a weird resurgence of it with the way the Trump administration deals with stuff and how they do things on Twitter and whatnot, or the Signal chat leaks. But like, that's unintentional, I think. There was an intentional openness that people just never thought about, and it's gone.
I think speaking of where we are now in our political climate, we can kind of take everything we've learned and answer the question that we started the episode with. What would it take to impeach President Trump? Well, the very first thing that you're going to need is a Democratic majority in the House. Nothing happens without that, barring a all-time Republican mutiny that I honestly do not think is even worth thinking about because it's so far-fetched. So in 2026, Democrats are going to be looking to flip the House. The House right now is a razor thin Republican majority. You flip a few seats and you're there. So that's likely when you're going to see action come in that respect. In terms of actually convicting and removing Donald Trump through impeachment, you would need, firstly, to flip a whole bunch more Senate seats, but even that's not enough because you're never getting to that 2/3 majority, barring a complete collapse of the Republican Party. So what you would need is a strong Democratic showing in the Senate races in 2026, plus enough Republicans rebelling against the Trump administration to make up those numbers. I don't want to get anyone's hopes up. It's not particularly likely, just the way that the system works and the way that the parties vote. It is wildly unlikely. That being said, if the Democrats win in 2026, if they flip the House, I think you will see a third impeachment trial of President Trump, which will mean
another for the record.
For the
kind of
record,
thing,
exactly. Which will put him as the majority of impeachments in American history, which is kind of a cool record to have. I mean, he's already 2 out of the 4, so he'd be 3 out of 5.
And hey, Trump loves these kinds of things.
He might like that record.
He has a portrait of his mugshot up just outside of the Oval Office. You know, I've said before, Trump loves good TV.
Yeah.
Like, no news is bad news to Trump. He doesn't care.
Yeah.
He'll roll with it.
So, if you're a numbers person, right now the House is 218 Republicans to 215 Democrats. Again, that's a couple seats flipping, and you're there. The Senate is a lot tougher. It's 53 Republicans, 45 Democrats, and 2 independents that caucus with the Democrats. So kind of Democrat-leaning independents.
Yeah.
So basically 53 to 47. You're not going to get to 67, so you have to just hope to get as many as possible and make up those numbers in Republicans that have had enough of Trump. I don't know where you find them, but you got it. That's where you got to do it.
Few and far between, my friend.
Yeah. So let's end on a lighter note here. One of the things that I found during my research for this that is lots and lots of fun is that during these Senate trials, one thing that senators will do, and they can do this pretty much any time that the Senate is in. The Senate is doing Senate business, is that they can get Senate passes for people. So if you want to come and see the Senate do Senate stuff on an average day, you can ask your local senator and they can get you a pass.
I would be so painfully nerdily into that.
Oh, Josh, wait. So in every impeachment trial, all the way back to Johnson in the 1800s, the senators of the day started printing tickets to give out to people as their passes. So they have commemorative tickets. You can find online and on eBay for very exorbitant prices tickets to the both of Trump's impeachments, to the Clinton impeachment, even some like artifacts of the Johnson impeachment, and people save them as little like keepsakes, like you would save tickets from a concert. It's very, very cool. I desperately want a full set.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
but-
If there's anything that I'm a sucker for, it's kind of different versions of American propaganda. So like I love Tom Clancy stuff. You know, I love like kind of like the 80s, 90s movies of American exceptionalism, but I also love American political artifacts. Like there is just something about it that just scratches a part of my brain. I want in on it.
Yeah. So if you're lucky enough to get your hands on one of those things, I think they're a very cool display piece. And really, there's been, to date, 4 impeachments in American history. That's so few. Right? It really is so few. They're very rare. They haven't been rare in our lifetime, but that's just our lifetime has been a time. And so, it's a really kind of interesting part of the American political system. But that's going to about do it for this one. I hope that everyone listening has learned a little bit more about the American political system and how it all works or doesn't work. And on behalf of myself and Josh, I hope you have I hope you've enjoyed the episode, and we'll see you next time.
This has been a Haunted Mouse production. Cut that out.